Is everything in this show unraveling? Season 2, Episode 3 of Sons of Anarchy is called Fix, but maybe it should really be called Nothing is Fixed. Clay and Gemma are unraveling, which is driving Clay to make decisions based off of anger and spite. He's beating up her car, causing trouble at Cara Cara, and the wedge between him and Jax is just continuously getting nailed deeper and deeper and deeper. All the while, Zobel and his group of white supremacists are on offense, introducing drugs to Charming in an attempt to drive SAMCRO out. This thing's chaotic. Welcome to Belated Binge, the podcast that exists so that you can relive your favorite show, Sons of Anarchy. Before we jump in, I want to send a huge shout out to Harley117 and one other just incredibly awesome individual in the bonus Binge squad on Patreon. Now, there are a lot of subplots to get into in this episode, as there are with, well, pretty much every Sons of Anarchy episode that exists, ever. This show doesn't slow down even when it's setting something up or winding down from something, and that's a lot of what this episode truly is. There's plenty happening, but it's mostly setting up for Zobel's chess game against SAMCRO, and you could say that he's several moves ahead at least. But at least in this episode, our guys have learned that there's a game being played at bare minimum. We get more of Bobby in this episode, which is cool, and it kicks right off with him from the jump. This episode opens on Bobby Elvis, and he's looking, well, pretty good after his gunshot wound to the shoulder. It doesn't really mean anything, but it's part of that, like, mostly lighthearted opening that shows Jax and Tara, they're happy, they've got some comedic porn shenanigans happening. It's a refreshing moment to bring in some humor into the show following the last episode, which was incredibly heavy, if you recall. As a reminder, that last episode was the major fallout from Gemma's sexual assault, and the club was dealing with their own fallout from Jax staging that Mayan that Opie killed as a gang shooting, putting the Niners and the Mayans at odds again, and the club smack dab in the middle of it, and it came back to bite them when the Mayans blew up that gun drop that the Niners were having, and that's where Bobby got shot, and we saw Opie do that weird, not afraid to die bit where he just walks right out into a hurl of bullets. Luckily, nobody in these shows can shoot unless we absolutely need them to. Then they're snipers, but that's not what we're doing in this particular episode, because it's not all fun and games. We're starting to see the impact of Gemma's secret on her marriage to Clay, which is the first storyline that we're going to follow here. Clay's getting frustrated because it's been a few weeks since the accident, and Gemma seems to be spending a lot of nights on the couch, and he's not a fan. They clearly haven't had any intimacy, and that is not something he's particularly thrilled with, and they don't seem to be communicating a whole lot either. And while Clay's not the gentle, supportive type, he also has no idea what Gemma's actually been through. Remember, she's calling it a car accident, thanks to Unser. And in his mind, she had that car accident, and she's sore. That shouldn't equate to her putting this distance between them in their, most intimate moments and in their marriage. Now, he also might just want laid, but I get the feeling that it's not just the physical part, because it does seem like she's mostly avoiding being around him in general, and he has no idea why. You don't get too many moments to actually feel for Clay on this show, but this is kind of one of them. Now, of course, Gemma is going through way more, and us as the audience knowing that just makes Clay look like, well, an asshole. But he doesn't know. However, that doesn't exactly excuse the behavior that comes up in this episode at Cara Cara, where So he sends Bobby up there. He doesn't care if it pisses off Luann. And then he does get pissed when Gemma goes up there to be supportive of her friend, and he expresses his anger by throwing a cement block through the window of her car and beating the shit out of the hood. And I mean, nearly her, but we get the sense that at least in this episode, wasn't going to go there. We will get to later seasons on another day. Luckily, Jax is there to kind of step up and calm this down, just in case it did get that far. And it seemed like Clay realized something was more off than usual with the way that Gemma reacted to his touch. Because again, yes, was it out of line? Yes, but you get the feeling that they've had plenty of these types of interactions and engagements, arguments over the however many years of their marriage, and she probably handled them slightly differently. A more controlled Gemma, a controlled Gemma that we're used to seeing already on this show, and she freaked out in a way that is very much not Gemma. He does try to reconcile later in the episode and talk to her about it very calmly, and Gemma still can't stand for him to touch her. And she doesn't even want to have dinner with him, likely because she knows what dinner is probably going to be expected to lead to, and she's just not ready for that. And instead, she sends him to the porn party, and she knows that she's giving him the hall pass. You can see it, and it's brilliantly acted because they don't verbalize any of it, but you can see on Clay's face that he's openly telling her, like, hey, if you don't want to hang out with me and you don't want to be together, I'm going to go to this place, and you know what kind of place this is, and you know what's going to happen there. And you can see that realization on her face as well in the scene, and you can almost see her calculating kind of behind her eyes almost, and going, you know what? Yeah, you need to go do that. And I know what's likely to take place there, and I'm okay with it because I think in this weird way in this world that exists, this is her saying, like, yeah, you have needs and I'm not satisfying said needs, and so I'm giving you permission to go take care of that. So it's saying a lot without saying anything really in that scene, which the chemistry between Gemma and Clay in the show and with Ron Perlman and Katie Sagal is really, really good. Pretty much throughout the 7-season tenure. But back to the episode. We find out why Bobby was doing that Elvis bar mitzvah gig at the beginning of the episode. Apparently, he's been doing a ton of them because he's completely underwater financially, and his kid needs kid stuff. He's a dad. You know, they have medical expenses. He obviously has to pay child support, and we realize, if we didn't already know, I can't remember if they mentioned it directly in season 1 or not, but he also has alimony to pay, and so he's really struggling, and Clay takes the opportunity of giving him that bookkeeping job that I mentioned earlier at the porn studio, which is what sent him there and set Luann off in all of those events between Clay and Gemma in the first place. He doesn't ask Luann about it. He doesn't ask Jax about it. He's not interested in their opinion on the matter in any way because Clay's too worked up in his own stuff and his own bruised ego that he's just yelling about getting answers about Darby, and he's taking shots at Jax about the porn business, and he's yelling about how Jax is being selfish, and he's reacting to everything very emotionally, throughout this, and Bobby is clocking all of it. And you can see it throughout the interactions with Bobby in this episode. But as Jax is getting the news, he all he's really saying to Clay, or has been saying to Clay about Cara Cara is like, hey, this is legitimate business. This is money that the cops can't take, they can't touch, they can't get mad or upset about. This is all on the up and up, and I brought this partnership to the club, and I'm the one that's been interfacing with Luann. You should have given me a heads up that you were going to send Bobby there. He's not saying I would have said no to Bobby being there or argued about Bobby being there. He just said, hey, you should have, given me a heads up. And you see that again with the interaction with Bobby, where he said to him, I'm happy to have you there. I'm supportive of this. I just, should have known that it was happening. And as this is happening, while Bobby is uncovering just all kinds of issues with Luann's accounting abilities, or so he thought, we find out why she's actually so upset to have him there. It's not because she's getting pushed out of her business. It's not because the club is overstepping their partnership. It's not because her books are actually in shambles. It's because he finds the money that she's been hiding from the club since day one. And we don't get a true explanation as to why. At first, it almost seems like an extortion type of a thing, but then you have to kind of like piece together for yourself that Luann is Otto's old lady, and Otto was the one who gave her the money to start the business that she has. And so it seems like where Otto got the money from was from the club, and there was likely some kind of agreement in place to where they got like an investment fee of some sort that she wasn't paying them. And she decides that instead of letting Bobby get out of that office and taking it to the table, she's going to use her considerable skill set to persuade him to keep this information confidential between just two consensual adults who are protected under what we learned to be called a prison clause, because I just mentioned she's Otto's old lady, and Bobby points that out, and she knows the bylaws of her actions, apparently. And this seems to be more than Bobby can really handle based off of his silence and his limp afterwards. So outside of Bobby, it's not just a big episode for him. It's also a big episode for Jax and Tara too. And before I get into that part, I just want to give a moment of appreciation for the way that they staged his DX in this scene at the park. His motorcycle, the angle of the shot, the way the bike just it looks like a wet dream. I personally would like a little bit more pullback than he has on the T-bars, but maybe go stainless 2-1. Real Dynabro. I would go real Dynabro on his Dyna, although some people credit this show for the birth of Dynabro. I cannot say one way or the other. All I can say is it's a beautiful motorcycle. Jax and Tara have what do they call it? A carnivorous moment, full of porterhouses and public displays of affection, and they didn't quite get to public nudity yet because it gets interrupted because of Bobby's said appearance and how well that was taken by Luann, as you may have expected and we've alluded to already, but not for the reasons that you might expect, which we find out later. For now, Jax just has to clean it up because he wasn't brought into the loop by Clay, and these two butting heads continues to be a problem, yet we've barely scratched the surface. And Cara Cara is almost like the innocent bystander at the center of the feud between Clay and Jax throughout the whole season. It's not just an issue with Clay and Jax either, it's also an issue for Tara, with one actress at Cara Cara in particular, Ima. And she's got a clever little plan to get her wish, which is apparently Jax, which they didn't really set up very well, in my opinion. I don't know. They kind of bring this character out of seemingly nowhere. Her and Lila were both introduced in the last episode as obviously actresses within Luann's porn business, but we didn't get a lot of them. And I mentioned, I actually did a thing for social media and on Shorts, if you're watching on YouTube, about how they actually introduced these two characters completely perfectly, and they kind of foreshadowed who they would be from a personality standpoint in just nothing in the last episode. But that's what I mean. We have nothing, and we don't get the sense that there's been anything between Jax and her in like any sense at all heading into this. And yet she's like demonstrative with Tara, acting almost as if her and Jax have some kind of, when I say relationship, I don't even mean an intimate one. I mean any at all personal relationship between the two of them. And she's just super confrontational to Tara, and she's going to cause a complete shitstorm on set for Luann if Jax doesn't take special interest in her, which works. She's all just up his hindquarters the whole episode and starts stuff with Tara at every turn that she possibly can, including the moment that she walks into the party late in the episode where Tara doesn't exactly follow Gemma's advice that she got directly. She does stand up to Ima, but she backs down rather than fight her. But, of course, we know, as the episode closed, Tara gets the final laugh in the bathroom and gives Ima that, how do you like this look over Jax's shoulder as they're, doing the thing. So the next big plot point that I want to get into, though, is the white supremacy group that is continuing their goal of getting rid of SAMCRO. Zobel sharing the photos of Clay meeting with Leroy in the last episode with Hale. It's the start of their new game plan, the next step in their phased approach, because clearly they're playing chess. The pitch to Hale is to start a drug problem in Charming to get rid of the club, and then when Hale takes over for Unser, the drugs just magically go away and he gets to look like the hero. And I love that Hale doesn't immediately fall for this. Remember back to the first episodes of this show back in season 1, when we met Hale, he's just a complete and total douche. Let's be honest. It is what it is. He gives you the impression that he would absolutely salivate over an opportunity to become chief, to get rid of SAMCRO, and have everyone think that he is the hero. But that's not truly who he is. He has integrity. He has morals. He's too straight-laced to align with our anti-heroes, of course, but he's also not about to do something that's going to harm the town to get him what he wants. Or so we think. And while we're thinking, Zobel is thinking he doesn't care. He has no concern about whether he actually has Hale on board or not. He never did. He's putting the plan into motion no matter what. And unfortunately, Hale's stance buckles in this episode when he gets the info that the meth lab that Darby is running is in the works already. He goes and he confronts Zobel, and he gets a speech about getting dirty for Charming, and he actually buries the intel. And the speech that he gets is enlightening, too, because it shows just how little concern Zobel has for the people that he's working with. There are literally no more valuable lives to him at all. They're just pawns on a chessboard. He literally doesn't care. When Hale confronts him about Darby cooking meth and Charming, Zobel doesn't deny it's even happening. He just goes, all right, go arrest him. I don't care. We know he's working with the Mayans, which goes against the mission statement of his entire organization. White power and all of that. And he doesn't care. That does not bother him in the slightest. He gives background on his motivation To Hale, though, and it apparently stems from his wife being killed in a drive-by, which is obviously insinuating that white people don't do drive-bys, but it suggests that he has absolutely nothing to lose and why he has zero shits to give. And that could have something to do with why he's literally willing to deploy any tactic whatsoever, no matter who it hurts or how dirty it is, to get the thing that he wants. But it doesn't explain where his arrogance or his aura, his sense of being untouchable comes from. Even when he's talking directly to a police officer and incriminating himself, he doesn't care. He feels like he has an invisible force field around him that Hale or anybody else wearing a badge just simply can't touch him. And we don't know why. Yet. That comes later. And we could get into that right now. But we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. What is happening right now, though, is alongside of this plot point, the club is actually starting to look into Zobel and Darby as they go into like recon mode, because apparently Juice can dig up any information on anything at any time electronically, and these guys are, I don't know, they're a SWAT team when the show needs them to be. Turns out Darby is cooking meth. His boys are dealing the meth in Charming, which was discovered by Opie and Halfsack, and apparently Jesse from Fast and the Furious had Arian back up in that scene. So, by the way, shout out to Jesse from Fast and Furious. I had a white Jetta when I was same body style. It says, once upon a time as a child, teenager, not literal child. I didn't have a car when I was a child. Who has a car when they're a child? Anyways, basically what they learn is that Zobel is squeaky clean on paper. But the last place that he showed up resulted in a motorcycle club being completely wiped out. They all went to prison for aggravated assault. They were also in the gun business. And the part in this that I want to hone in on is that Jax already has this whole thing figured out. While others are worried about whether Zobel can get Hale in his pocket, he's noticing a pattern of behavior. When Tig mentions that Zobel stepped to the club, which we saw in the first episode of this season, he says one line that stands out. He was trying to incite you. He gets it. That's the game that Zobel plays. He pokes the bear. He pokes and he pokes and he pokes and he pokes until the bear loses his shit and attacks. And then the bear gets put down for being dangerous. This is the same thing that he's doing with these motorcycle clubs that he's apparently just getting good at being contracted to run out of town. He's an instigator. And Jax knows that. And he's already deduced that that's how he took down that other MC. He instigated them, and then they went to jail when they retaliated. And unfortunately, he's the only one that's caught on to this, and that's going to remain the case for a while. For now, it's about Darby, and they come up with a clever way to get Jesse from Fast and the Furious alone, and they entice the location of the cook shack out of him in a manner befitting this classy group of individuals. And by that, I mean Tig steps on his nuts until he talks. That's one way to go. What is a little less crude, though, is the scene at the table. Jax and Clay are once again at odds with what they're supposed to do and how they should handle the cook shop. Clay wants to blow it up. Jax doesn't want the trail to lead back to them. Jax wants to get the cops to do it, and Clay has a plan for that. And it's actually a smart one. They decide that they're going to give the info to the police, but instead of giving it to Unser, who is chief of police, they're going to give it to Hale. And the idea here is that if he shuts it down and does his job, he's obviously not working with the bad guys. If he doesn't, he's in their pocket. And Jax knows that Hale's not dirty, but it doesn't look that way. And the outcome is, of course, boom. And that's exactly what Zobel wanted. So now there's video footage of them shooting up the house and, of course, blowing it up after Opie's interesting choice of trying to race death. And question for my chemists out there, or maybe just those of you who are on the Breaking Bad binge. They blew up a house that was used to cook meth. Wouldn't the smoke be, like, super toxic? Just real bad, like deathly toxic? And they just stand around like it's time to roast some marshmallows over a campfire. And the cops don't wear masks or anything. And I don't really understand. But what I do understand, well, actually, you know what? I don't understand this either. Why Hale doesn't do anything about it or mention this or say anything. He could have even just told Unser that he had gotten a tip that he was unreliable or something, you know what I mean? Like, but he just says, nope, didn't hear anything. As if he couldn't put two and two together that if Jax is coming to him with information, it's not a stretch that they could give the same information to Unser. So when Unser comes to you asking if you've heard anything about this and you just say, no, nothing, he knows you're full of crap. That part doesn't... Hale seems smarter than that. And yet, I don't know. He's very brooding in this episode, so maybe he's not thinking clearly. But that's essentially the episode in a nutshell from multiple different angles and through several different lenses that we get to see it. And kind of, let's be honest, it's kind of all over the place. There's emotion with Gemma that's legitimately hard to watch. Clay's a complete lunatic, like, the whole time. Jax is navigating his issues with Clay and how they're impacting the club, while also having to deal with the strain of, you know, being the middleman in a porn business, and his relationship with Tara because of the whole Ima of it all, and she's dealing with Gemma's issues and Ima and all of that. It's a lot of unraveling going on. You know, it's a lot of relationship drama balanced by a coordinated attack from Zobel, who proves once again that he is steps ahead, and he has been from the very beginning. This isn't a one tactic, you know, approach that he's going with. He has a full assault plan against SAMCRO, and to this point, they haven't even realized that anything was happening. It's a sick, twisted, disgusting game of chess, and he's barely even started moving the pawns. And, I mean, season 2 is when the show truly kind of starts to get heavy. I think that's why I've always enjoyed season 1, maybe most of all the series, you know, personally, because the stakes are a lot lower for the most part, and we're just having fun in most of it. It's bikes, bullets, and brotherhood, and obviously heavy stuff happens, crazy shit happens in season 1 too, but it's lighter than this season and all of the seasons to come. You know, this episode reminds me of that. It's still heavy subject matter throughout, but there's more comedic, more lightheartedness, more I said comedic and jokes to get, like, that's not the same thing. But it just, I think the balance is there. And, you know, it's clearly not the best episode of the series, but it is enjoyable. So I guess let me know what you think of it, because that's it for what I've got for you today. As always, thank you for being here and joining me on this binge of my favorite TV drama ever made, Sons of Anarchy. There is a Patreon for the show if you're so inclined and you want some bonus content, such as my 11-chapter Sons of Anarchy fan fiction that I was writing back in 2020. I have read it and uploaded it for your listening pleasure over there. It is intended to be a sequel, so I suggest, if you are brand new to the show, there's spoilers in it, is all I'm going to say. But otherwise, again, thank you for being here. And remember, life is short. Buy the motorcycle. And when you do, wear a helmet. Dress for the slide, not the ride. And always take Belated Binge along for that ride.